So my number three is a film from 2000, High Fidelity, directed by Stephen
Ah,
Frears, starring John Cusack, Jack Black as well. So a little segue on Jack Black here. And Catherine Zeta-Jones is based on a Nick Hornbury novel. The IMDb plot is Rob, a record store owner and compulsive list maker, recounts his top five breakups, including one in progress. So this is a film from 2000, and I saw this in the theaters in this time. And for me, one of the things that definitely made me want to put this on the list, and something that a reason why this movie affected me a lot of the time, is it's a very good encapsulation of like geek culture. I mean, the Rob, who's the main character, John Cusack's character here, is like a music geek. Like, he's obsessed with records and always doing lists of records and things.
yep.
I love music, but more of a film nerd. So I really like identified with that character of like obsessing over these lists. But I think too, like actually looking back on this movie in more recent times since I've seen it, it really, I think, speaks to something that I've come more recently kind of come across in the last couple years, is around like that love can bring maturity, and that sometimes being immature and sort of delayed the delayed maturity is something kind of holds you back from love. So, Rob's character, or John Cusack's character, Rob, in this film is definitely very, very self-centered. All the relationships. So like I mentioned with the log line, he's going over his top five breakups of all time. They're all about like why he was with those women. Not anything that they were doing or that he was doing for them. It was like, oh, this is the first woman that I kind of had attraction to. This is a woman I dated because, I was only physically attracted to her. This is a woman that I dated because she was so interesting intellectually. I felt like I could somehow like glom onto some of her intelligence by dating her. So it was a very like self-centered way of looking at it. And it also was a very way of sort of looking at love as something that had to be perfect, of this fantasy. So he definitely is someone who was jumping around these relationships trying to find like the perfect woman to be with that was satisfying all the things on his list that he wanted in a relationship, which is something that, at the time when this was like 20 years ago when I saw this film, that was also how I kind of looked at things, because I was not mature enough to kind of realize the growth that Rob goes through in this film at the very, very end, when it's about, you can't go chase the fantasy. Like, nothing's going to be perfect. And it's really like love is less too about what you're getting out of the other person, but what that person can give to you, or sorry, what you can give to that other person. And then what they can give back to you. So there's a lot of moments, especially at the end of the film, where his ex-girlfriend, which is the most recent breakup they talk about, she basically needs him in a moment in the film when her father passes away, and she really needs him to feel something. And because he's able to give that to her, that feeling of just getting over this loss of her dad, I think that really resonates with him. It's like, oh, wow, like this feels good actually when I'm able to help the person in the relationship that I'm in, instead of just sort of taking a lot of things out of it. And then she actually even then returns the favor, and he has a list of like his dream jobs of all time. And these are crazy like fantasy dream jobs of, oh, I wish I was, a record producer in the 60s or Rolling Stone reviewer in the 70s. I mean, things that you can't do, right? Total fantasies. And she basically says to him, wait, you own a record store. Like, isn't that one of your dream jobs? And he's like, yeah, actually it is. She's like, great. I'm adding that to the list. Now you have your dream job. So she's now helping him realize that, oh, wait a second. I am getting what I want out of things. Like, love doesn't have to be perfect, and neither does, your dream. You actually are living your actual dream job, and not get so caught up in the fantasy. So I really do think that that's something that's important to love as well, and especially the very end of the film. So does the monologue halfway through about mixtapes. There's a lot of scenes about mixtapes and how, the mixtape is something you're trying to express to the other person, and how to come up with the perfect mixtape. And at the very end of the movie, he's created a mixtape, not of some like his favorite songs, but he's trying to create a list of, or a mixtape for what his now girlfriend, again, he gets her back in the end, what she would want. So he's all of a sudden now focused on her desires and what she wants. And that really, to me, is what shows the maturity that he's in. And, at the time when I saw this, like, I kind of didn't catch on to that part of the film just because I was so immature about what relationships should be and what love really is. But now looking back in the years since, because I watch this movie quite often, it's one of my favorite movies of all time, actually. And I'm able to now mature myself like Rob and see a lot of those things more in the film and get those messages away from it. because I've matured a lot myself and in the relationships that I've had and understanding what love really is. But yeah, it's one of my favorite movies. I recently rewatched it just in preparation for this and just still blown away how awesome of a film this is and just great performance all along. But, I think it really does a great job of capturing this fact that, again, love is not, isn't a fantasy and you shouldn't be chasing that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I had not seen this movie before. I started watching this movie maybe a couple of years ago. And it was the initial sort of setup of nerd culture. I was like, I can't, this is too much.
Yeah.
I don't want to be with these people.
Yeah.
I was never part of that club, I guess, growing up and such. So I actually put the movie down. So it was fun to pick this movie back up again after all these years. And you hit it on the head. Like, I think it really chronicles his journey of, getting mature, finding out that love is more than just some fantastical picture that you created in your head. So I think all that was great. It moved so nicely, the movie. And I was thinking about this, like Stephen Frears, I think it's one of his gifts as a director. Like all of his movies, they end up kind of tackling lots of different themes, sometimes that are about royalty or what have you, but they have this very easy kind of way of getting along while keeping it entertaining and also keeping it interesting and light. So I thought that was pretty amazing. The two things that sort of still sit with me that I'm wrestling with a little bit is, number one, John Cusack's casting. Like, I don't know how old he is. To me, he looks like a 40-year-old man. And maybe that's the point. But that's sort of, as a whole other element to the movie that, oh, you still have not matured even though you're so old.
Right.
And I don't know if this is what they were going for, but he just looks really old to me. And then the second one, which probably is the bigger one to me, is that I don't think the girl comes back. I think there's still a lot more learning that has to happen and maturity that has to happen at the end. And I would have felt, and maybe this is just, watching this movie now for the first time in the times we live in. So it's obviously coloring my perspective quite a bit, but to me, it would have felt a lot more believable if she just wanted to engage and talk to him and hang out, as opposed to moving back in and, oh, suddenly this is like a full-on relationship. That to me felt a little bit odd because the rest of the movie feels very realistic, actually. So I found that part a little bit unbelievable. But the theme that you're hitting on, Alex, like I really connected with that. Like, we've all had this journey of some sort of ideal, perfect person to be list that we made in our head. And it takes a bit to go through life and realize, A, that doesn't exist. And B, you probably don't even want that person.
Right.
Even if that person existed, which by the way doesn't, you have to figure out who you are. And because a relationship by definition is about two people, not one person. Otherwise you could just hang their picture on the wall and be in a relationship with the picture, So, but yeah, very glad I watched this movie, and also a great time capsule to the 2000s.
Oh my God. Yeah. It's
clothes and
I love that. Yeah.
Back to Zeta Jones. Like, she looks incredible. So good.
Yeah. No, definitely. And the thing about the age, I mean, I actually don't know how old John Cusack was at the time. When I saw this movie, I was, 18 or something. So whatever he was looked, like late 20s, early 30s or whatever. But, I think that does really say something about, the delayed kind of transition into adulthood. And also too, like, even if he was in his 40s, I think in the film, he's supposed to probably be in his late 20s, like early 30s. But that it can really happen at any time, like that growth moment that he has, and that you're always still growing and maturing, and and yeah, maybe too, like that culture that he was in, that geek culture was maybe holding him back a little bit because he was obsessing over these things. And I think that is also just sort of a lesson of this movie as well. Of you can still appreciate the music but it doesn't always have to be about you and like these obsessive lists and things. And that I think was holding him back a little bit. But again, at the time, like that was what was related, like I related to, because I also love making lists. And, there's all the dialogue that he had in that record store with his friends would be the same dialogue I'd have. That was in college. I was beginning to go into college at the time. Like that was, hanging out with my friends in college and high school was the same kind of stuff. Oh, what are your top 3 this or your top 5 this? And it was all that. So those scenes like were very, authentic and kind of made me identify a lot with the Cusack character. But, again, now I can kind of look back and see, oh yeah, like I identify with that portion of it, but now also with his emotional growth and the things that he needed to learn. I've definitely like learned a lot of that along the ways myself, much like he did in the film. And, I do think the ending, I like that she does go back to them, but it's not something where like, okay, now they're getting married or it's some, magical kind of like Hollywood ending. Very ambiguous about, no, he's learned stuff. He has in the last 10 minutes of film grown is what he needs to do. And he grew. And now hopefully he's going to live a more fulfilling life, whether it's with her or someone else. So that I always resonated with me too, that the ending wasn't some like, oh, I'm proposing. Okay, great. Let's get married. And now everything's perfect. Not at all. It's very much like, who knows what can happen, but at least now he's, made this step.
Yeah, it's happened with him. I think I would have just appreciated a little bit of more character development on her part.
Sure. Yeah.
To kind of show that ambiguity that, yeah, I appreciate your growth and I want to be a part of it, but I'm also a little bit hesitant.
Right.
Because I've seen what's happened so far. And, this is very typical of a lot of movies from that time and even now where, a lot of characters and often the female characters, they're not fully developed.
Right.
And, I think about if this movie was written now by someone like Greta Gerwig or Olivia Wilde, where every fringe character has agency and is fully fleshed out, this movie would be a whole other level movie. But at the same time, it speaks to something very personal and it is his journey. He is the protagonist of the movie. So that's what it's about.
Yeah, he speaks in the first person to the audience. I mean, it's kind of tough. It's clearly through everything is through his point of view, more so than the others. And two, well, as we move on to then your number 2, I want to call you out a little bit because you said, oh, this, like the geek culture thing turned you off, and now you're on a podcast where you're ranking your top 3 movies. So. Welcome to the club, buddy.
I know. No, and it was sort of more of an in the moment thing.
I know.
They said, I'm sort of, if not an official card holder, definitely an unofficial card holder of the club.
Yeah, but at least they're making
enjoyed, huh?
At least they're making a list club. You're in that now, definitely. Officially.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. No, but watching the movie again, as in like fully, properly this time, I actually really got into the 3 friends and also like, just it made me nostalgic for music stores and the whole vibe of that time. And it's sort of sad that, we don't have these physical spaces where you could hang out with people on common interests and get into it. I mean, of course, nerd culture exists in a totally different way, but there's something special about these places, which don't exist anymore.
Hey there, it's Alex. If you like the review and discussion Karan and I just had, make sure you subscribe to our channel, Movies That Shaped Us, to get full episodes. Every other Wednesday, Karan and I cover a topic around important people, places, events, and moments in our lives, and then explore it through 3 of our favorite movies. Subscribe right now, or follow our podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts via the link in the description below. Hope you join us for the journey.